In this video, you'll find out everything you need to know about starting bolt action in the new 3rd edition. Welcome to the Dice Gods. My name is Hydra and I am a new recruit to the world of bolt action from Warlord Games. Today we're going to look at starting the game with any new game. Diving in can be a little intimidating. Where to start and what to get? Well, we're not going to advise you which army and minis to buy, so sorry if you're here for that. At least not today. But we are going to give you some tips to get started. Whilst you're here, if you want to see more bolt action goodies, then please like, share and subscribe, and if you can, please sign up as a channel member or Patreon. The more support we get, the more videos you get. So it costs less than a Starbucks. It helps us hugely, so please consider signing up. So, bolt action. Let's go. If you've not seen the game before, bolt action is a 28mm scale World War II company level wargame. So what does that all mean? Well, it means that an average person in the game is around 28mm tall. That's our scale. World War II means that it's set between 1939 and 1945 during, well, World War II. Company level lets you know how many miniatures you're roughly going to need to play. Now, this varies by the army, quality, point size of game, and loadout of the soldiers which you take. But if you say mostly fewer than 60 miniatures and sometimes less than 35, you'll be about right. You can currently play most of the major antagonists from within that conflict, so Britain, Germany, the US, Russia and Japan. Other small factions are available, but at the minute they're somewhat limited, though that will expand later. We're going to touch on a few details and rules about the game within this video, but this won't be a review of the system itself or how to play. If you want one of those, well, that's coming soon-ish. Right, that's the introduction to the game, but let's talk about the brand new simplest way to get into this system first. Before we dive into the big, heavy, grown-up rulebooks and starter sets and terrain and tokens and all that jazz, let's start with the simplest route, with the bolt action starter set. Now this little guy has only recently dropped. It is by far the most cost-effective and straightforward way to get into bolt action 3rd edition. This pits the German Grenadiers versus US Rangers. The set includes a 68-page rulebook, so this is a cut-down field manual version, apparently. There are 12 German Grenadiers, 12 US Rangers. There is a plastic farmhouse in here. You've got a double-sided gaming mat, which is 30 inches by 22-ish inches. There are tokens in here. You have got some order dice. We'll cover those more in a minute. There are some 6-sided dice. We'll cover those more. Dice bag, this is important, and the box, actually the inside of the box turns into an in-game bunker, and if memory serves there's also a cardboard German half-track, so there's a lot in here. The best thing about this is that it's €51 for Warlord directly. Other places you're getting it cheaper. That will give you everything you need to try the game out. It will give you the core guts of the game, just to give it a try. If you aren't sure that you want to dive into historical, if you've got a kid that is wanting to try this kind of thing, but you're not sure whether it's going to work for them, this box is a really cost-effective way to just dip your toe. Just try it out. I think it's a fantastic idea by Warlord. I applaud them for it. I think this makes bolt action a much more accessible proposition, not just from the perspective of costs, but also from the perspective of 12 versus 12. Here's your mat, here's your terrain, go throw dice. Fantastic. This is the way it should be. This is exactly the way it should be. So if you're looking for the simplest, easiest and cheapest way to get into bolt action 3rd edition, this is it. That's the video. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe, share, ciao. Nothing else to say. That's it right there. However, If you're like me and you have to dive into this up to your ears from day one, let's talk about what that looks like and what you're going to need to get started with the game. First and foremost, you'll be needing the 3rd edition rulebook. You can pick this up in currently 3 places. The first is in the brand new Battle of the Bulge 2-player starter set. We'll cover this one in a little more detail later, but it comes with an A5 softback copy of the rules ready to go. You can also pick up the A4 hardback rulebook, which is just awesome, and costs about €40. If you are one of those modern WizKid digital people, then for €30 you can get an ebook or PDF copy of the rulebook. Now this book is more than just a rulebook. It is fully all you need to play, so yes, you'll find the rules, but in the 320 A4 pages of this book, you'll find army lists for Britain, Germany, the US, Soviets and Japan. There are also several battle and story scenarios, which are missions to play the game. With bolt action being a mission-based system, this last point is very important. So when you pick up the rulebook, you really do have everything that you need to get a game rolling of this system. It's all there, from the points to winning the game. So snag yourself a copy and you are ready to go on that front. If you look for Warlord books, you'll also find armies of books and campaign books. The armies of books are nation-specific expansions which add more specific flavour and detail for the armies of those nations. As of this recording, we've had no armies of books yet, but they will start dropping at the start of next year. So when you look and find one of these armies of books, make sure it's for the 3rd edition. If it is from the 2nd edition, then it won't work with the new 3rd. Just be very aware of that one. It'll basically be lore, it'll be history. That's pretty much what you're going to see in there. When it comes to books, you'll also find campaign books like Operation Sea Lion and the Battle of the Bulge. These include updated units, history and missions around that specific moment in time, or theoretical moment in history if it's like Sea Lion, which was only a plan. Warlord says these books are compatible with 3rd edition, even though they're from the 2nd edition. But if you want specific theatre information and unique ways to play, these books are certainly worth tracking down, and they often come with an exclusive miniature, so that's quite cool too. That said, you're really not going to need it until you're further into the game and you've played a few games and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend you pick them up as part of your initial purchases. Now, speaking of factions, let's briefly touch on putting together a list. As with most war games, you agree a points value for each game, or it can be defined if you're playing in a tournament by the tournament organiser. Then you select your list based on the nation that you wish to play. There are some force structures, and you pay points per platoon up to the agreed limit. Currently, the standard size game is around 1,250 points, but I personally am playing 600 to 700 point games to get my eye in and figure my way through the rules. But how do you actually stick a list together? Well, once you've got that rulebook, you have all of the points and all of the structures that you need to put a list together. It's all there in the back of the book. So you can pick yourself a pen and paper and get scribbling and write one out. Of course, if you're a bit fancy, then maybe Excel is more your speed and you can put that spreadsheet together and put it in there. But if you've wargamed before or used the internet before, there are apps out there that let you build forces with all of the rules pre-built into them, so you don't need to remember anything and you can't make mistakes by missing a rule. There are free and paid ones. It's entirely up to you which you wish to do. Myself, I opted for the official Warlord Games app. Now, let's get this out of the way. If you want to use their official app, it will cost you around 25-ish euros a year. Yes, you get a gift voucher for about half of that to spend in their store, but this is a chargeable app in a world of free ones. This is clearly a bad thing, right? Well, no. Look, I come mostly from Infinity. If you've seen the channel, I play Infinity, and we have a free app. And I've used free army builders for, well, longer than I'd care to mention, as it ages me terribly. So why am I okay paying for this? Well, first and foremost, it works pretty much out of the box. And when there are issues, those issues are fixed in short order. There are a team behind this who are being paid to maintain and look after this. This isn't a enthusiastic player who is doing this in his evening and off time. The data inside is accurate, and as new books are released, the armies of books that I mentioned previously, they will be updated into the army lists in this app as options automatically. So the army builder will be up to date with the new releases. You won't be spending more. It'll just be there. This is good. We don't need to buy the armies of books. I mean, I'm buying them. That's just, my shelf needs them, that's all I can say. But you don't need to wait for the poor overworked dev team who build the free apps for their copy to come through the post, and then to sit down and read it, and then amend, and then upload, and then hopefully it's all okay. There is a team dedicated behind the scenes to keeping the Warlord app up and running. Is it a perfect app? No. But the subscription covers all nations in Bolt Action and a wealth of other Warlord games as well. So if you play more than one Warlord game, this is probably an even better deal for you. At some point, I will do a dedicated review of this app because actually I think it's worth having that conversation. Is this setting a precedent for other companies to start charging for their apps? Possibly. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, it stops you buying more miniatures, which reduces the pile of shame, which is a good thing. But I don't know, I think I'm impressed by this app and I'm happy with this app, and I don't find the amount that I spent on it bad or too much. I'm already feeling the value of what I spent. So if you're a new player or if you're new to wargames, this app will be a godsend. So I'd recommend spending the money, building that into your starting the game budget. You will have the peace of mind of knowing that everything is fine, and if something isn't fine, then they are paid to fix it, and they will. This helps. You'll also see that the app can be installed on your phone and is on the desktop, so you can work on both, and it shares data between them, and it's just nice. It just works. So yeah, if you're new, I'd recommend it. But the whole conversation about whether we should or shouldn't pay for army builder apps is one for another day, and one we certainly will be having. Next up, accessories. Every game has them. Bolt Action is no different. These are the gadgets and doodads which you need to make the game work. Not minis or terrain or fun stuff, just the admin that makes the game function. So what do you need for Bolt Action? First, the most important thing is order dice. These are custom 6-sided dice with different orders printed on each side. The orders are fire, advance, run, ambush, rally, and down. Why are these key? Well, at the start of each turn, each player will place one order dice in a bag per active platoon or vehicle which they have on the board. During the turn, a dice will be drawn from the bag, and the player who that dice belongs to may then activate a unit in their force. So they then select which particular order they want to give that unit and place the order dice down by that unit before activating it. That's right, Bolt Action isn't an I go, you go or alternating activation system. This is a random activation. You will pull a dice, and it could be you, it could be your opponent. Next time it could be you, them. This randomized element of the game is crucial to it, and it really gives that kind of unpredictable flavour to the game. It adds an extra layer of tension, which I find really interesting and quite cool. That moment of, okay, if I get the first dice, I can pull this off and the game is mine. As that hand goes into the bag to pull the first order dice out, there is nothing like it. It is awesome. This makes owning some order dice crucial though. You're going to need them, you have to have them to play the game. As a rule, you'll need about 12 to 20 of them for an average size game. They all need to look the same, there are different colours, and you can pick them up from Warlord in sets of 12, although some miniatures when you buy them will come with their own order dice, and some of the starter sets include them. So just keep an eye out for that when you're selecting your miniatures to buy. Next, you'll need some regular 6-sided dice, also known as D6s. I'd recommend about 20 of these as well. They are used to figure out everything in the game, like a normal war game or a board game. You use them to figure out combat and saves and if troops are on the way and all this kind of good stuff. So you're going to need those, you're going to need plenty of those, and ideally in a distinctive colour as well, because your opponent's going to be throwing them as well. Technically within the game, interestingly, there's supposed to be a pool of dice that both players use. You're supposed to share your dice with your opponent to avoid any shenanigans with dodgy dice, but that's entirely up to you. I'd recommend getting some money. Following that up, you will need a tape measure, which has inches on it so that you can figure out the movement and direction, all this kind of stuff of your troops as they wander around the board. You'll also need a template in inches to measure explosions. Some weapons make a big bang when they land of 1 inch or 2 inches or more. So you'll need a template to measure how many people are hit when the shot arrives and detonates. You can get this template also from Warlord with the next thing that is on our list, which is pin markers. When your troopers are getting shot at, it's likely to have an emotional impact, and they can become pinned. Essentially, they become reluctant to do anything because there's so many shots whizzing over their head that standing up sounds like a bad idea. In game terms, being pinned reduces their likelihood of following orders, makes them worse shots, and can even make them run away. So tracking which units are pinned and how badly they are pinned is crucial. You can get pin markers and an explosion marker from Warlord games, or you can find them in the set of the Battle of the Bulge starter, or alternatively, you can just mark it with different coloured dice. There's various ways you can do it. It's entirely up to you what you find best, but I like the little explosion-y style ones from Warlord. Last of all, on the admin side of things, there are many tokens and markers which denote conditions or effects on the battlefield. These are things like ranged-in markers for artillery, vehicle damage markers, and you can get those in these little dog tag forms from Warlord, and in the Battle of the Bulge set. But again, there are lots of different routes for these, so find out which ones you like and which ones you want to pick up. There are many out there, but it's worth having some, especially the ranged-in markers. When you fire artillery, it's if you hit the same location, when you try and hit the same location repeatedly, it gets easier every time you try and make that shot. So in turn 1, you need a 6 to hit your target. If you try and hit the same spot again, the next turn it's a 5, and the time after that it's a 4. So knowing which piece of artillery is firing at which particular spot with ranged-in markers tied back to the artillery pieces is important. So having those is key. For the rest, I'm not using vehicles yet, so there's different ways that I've seen people do it. Some people just do it on the honour system and remembering. But yeah, your mileage may vary, but I think having some markers is a good idea. That said, this is not an exhaustive list of stuff you need, but if you start with what we've just been talking about, you won't be missing too much. Next, which army should I get? Well, honestly, I don't know. Right now, we're in the early days of 3rd edition, with the first of the Armies of books arriving next year with loads of new toys in. I would recommend choosing the nation that you like the look of or which works best for you. My first bolt-action army is German. Why? Well, I split the Bulge box with a friend, and took the Fallschirmjäger from that box, who are German, and I'm also a fan of the Stug self-propelled gun. I don't know why, it's cute, okay? It's cute, so SPG, it is. Fight me. So yes, I am playing the bad guys. It also helps that I think I'm the only person in our local area who is playing the bad guys, so I'm, yeah, kind of the local punching bag, or I will be when I'm up to speed. Finding out which one works for you, which one you like the look of, which one resonates with you, that's the important thing. Find that, choose that army, and then when you have, it's time to pick up some minis. Here, I strongly recommend that you pick up one of the starter boxes with one caveat. So, let's talk about the starter boxes first. These tend to be a mix of infantry, support weapons, and armour at a cheaper price than buying the items separately would be. They include bases, decals, damage markers for the vehicles, and much more besides. If we look at the recently released Battle of the Bulge box with the Germans and the Americans, we've got vehicles, we've got terrain, we've got the templates that I mentioned, there's dice, there's order dice, there's a rulebook, there's everything you need to get started. Alternatively, there's other starter boxes for a specific army, and those will contain the miniatures that you need. They may contain some order dice and bits and pieces like that, but they won't contain the rulebook and all this kind of stuff. It's much more just miniatures and away you go. So the Bulge box is the official starter for 3rd edition. If you're looking to go German, if you're looking to go US, especially if you like the winter theme like me, then that is a really good place to start, and I'd recommend that you check that out. But I mentioned a caveat about these starter boxes. What is that? Well, to understand the issue, we first need to understand a little bit about army composition in Bolt Action 3rd edition. You see, when you're putting together your company, you can choose platoons to add into it. You must have one rifle platoon and can then add armoured or artillery, engineer, heavy weapons, recce, or more rifle platoons to it. Each of these platoons then has a minimum requirement of a platoon commander and 1 or 2 compulsory squads, vehicles or sections added to it. That's a lot of words. Let's look at this in action. If we take a rifle platoon, for example, you must take 1 commander and 2 infantry squads for the platoon to be legal. To that, you can add more infantry squads, medics, forward observers, snipers, anti-tank teams, light mortars and transports. But whatever else you add, you must have a commander and 2 infantry squads to start with. Now, when it comes to armoured platoons, i.e. tanks, self-propelled guns, all this kind of good stuff, you have to take a command vehicle and a single piece of armour. So you have to have 2 vehicles to field an armoured platoon in 3rd edition. The challenge is that when we look at the older starter boxes, which were built for 2nd edition, they will have only a single vehicle. So if you pick those boxes up, you can't field that vehicle out of the box. You will need to pick up an additional vehicle to fill out that armoured platoon with a command vehicle and a 2nd vehicle, or just not field it to start with. For all this talk about armour though, Bolt Action is still very much an infantry focused game. So you have to take a rifle platoon to start off your company. You can then add 1 of each of the other types on there. If you want to add, say, a 2nd armoured platoon, so you've got your rifle platoon, you have an armour platoon, and then you want to add a 2nd armour platoon, you have to take an additional rifle platoon to unlock a 2nd armour platoon. It's getting a bit complicated now, but yeah, these things need to be borne in mind. So if you are planning to field armour, you'll need a minimum of 2 vehicles. If you are planning to field heavy weapons, you will need 2 heavy weapons plus a commander on foot, just an ordinary trooper, to go with it to fill out your minimum requirements. Being clear on that is important. If you do use the official Bolt Action army builder, it will tell you what you have to have and what you may have. So it does help on that front. You get the nice exclamation marks when things are going sideways on that front. As you'd expect, the new starter boxes which are coming out, like the German ones, all have 2 vehicles, a piece of armour and a cheap vehicle HQ unit in them. But if you're picking up the game, make sure you're aware of that limitation, because if you don't want to go with German and it's the other factions haven't had their new starter boxes out yet, then if you only see 1 piece of armour in the box, you're going to need to buy a 2nd to field that. So just bear that one in mind. So how much does it actually cost to get started in the game? Well, as you'd expect, it depends. If you pick up the new Bold starter set, including the 2 small forces, order dice, a rulebook, templates and markers, it's about €112. And if you want to play German or the US, this is a great and cost-effective way to dive into the game. You've got the rulebook, it's all there. Boop, job done. If, however, that doesn't ring your bell, if you want to play the Japanese, if you want to play the British, if you want to play the Soviets, then you're looking in the starter box territory. As I say, if you want to run the vehicles that are in all those boxes, you need a 2nd one. You're going to need a rulebook, you're going to need your order dice, you're going to need your templates. You're looking at spending closer to the €250 to €300. But again, it depends which particular nation you go for, what particular flavour of army you go for. You know, if you want to run a wall of Soviets at your opponent, you can do that, but that's going to cost you more because you're going to need a lot more warm bodies to stick in that particular line. So if you allow yourself €250 to €300 to get a good size force with rulebook and everything else you need, that's not bad. That's kind of where you're going to be looking at. And that set will give you lots of different options and ways of customizing and building in different ways. So you'll have a truly unique force. It will be yours. It's not sort of a mono build that you get in these starter boxes. They are good value for what you get. On top of this, you will, of course, need a table of terrain to play on if you don't have a local store where you can already do that. But to be honest, that is a topic for a video all of its own. Terrain inside of any war game is a whole discussion, and the only thing you really need to know is that Bolt Action plays on 6x4, 6 foot by 4 foot tables, which are fairly realistically modelled, so they can have quite a lot of elements like woods and hedges and buildings and roads. Those things all need to be included and put in there. But as I say, that's one for another day, because there's lots of different schools of thoughts and approaches to that. So I'm going to leave that one to the side for now. So with all of that covered, let's talk about your first few games if you've never played a war game or if you've never played bolt action before, because understanding that can inform you about what you need to buy and what you can expect, and what I would suggest you should expect from your first few games. Let's talk about armies for a moment. If you pick up the Bulge starter set and you follow the building guide in it, then you have 2 balanced pre-made forces to get you started. So do that. Take that box, do what it says in the book, play that, you'll be absolutely fine. That will get you into the game. If not, then I'd recommend sticking to around 650 points with no vehicles and playing on a 4-foot by 4-foot table for your first few games. This limits the rules and choices that you have in the game, and as with any new system, it lets you get the core mechanics down without being swamped by ideas and concepts and approaches and da-da-da. It's the surest route of success. Make it easy on yourself until you've got the basics down. The great thing is, if you pick up one of those starter armies, you'll almost certainly have more than enough infantry to put together around that 600 point mark without bringing the armour. Then you can play the game with just those core rules. But as bolt action uses missions, I would recommend that you actually go with fixed missions. Normally you're supposed to roll, as the rules suggest. You're supposed to roll for your mission and your deployment and the sort of setting for it. But I'd say don't do that. Just play Seek and Destroy, details of which you can find on page 164 of the A4 rulebook, with Long Edge Deployment, which is on page 169 of the A4 rulebook, and Meeting Engagement, which is on page 170. This is then a straightforward kill everything that moves game. You score points for fragging stuff. It's a relatively straightforward deployment of long edges. You're facing each other, and then you actually move onto the board at the start of the game. So you don't have to really do a lot of deployment. You don't have to do a lot of thinking. You just get started in the game. Your first game, even though you're looking at about 600 to 700 points, it's going to take you a few hours to get through. So make sure you have time. But with those limited rules, it should be a relatively less painful experience than it would be if you're trying to do armor and artillery and da-da-da. Either way, trust me, you're going to have a blast. You won't regret it. It's a lot of fun. As with all war games, there are a lot of moving parts to joining bolt action, but if you take advantage of the starter sets which Warlord has made, then it will be pretty easy to dive in and not as massively expensive as some other systems out there. But just as with all systems, try not to go too far too fast. It's really tempting to buy all the pretty stuff. I'm always guilty of that. Do as I say, don't as I do. But try and limit yourself, because it's easy to get swamped. It's easy to have hundreds of miniatures set in front of you and a full Panzer division staring at you. Someone's got to put them together, someone's got to paint them, and it's going to have to be you, and that can feel overwhelming. And then when you get them on the board, there's all these rules and exceptions and concepts that you need to put your head around. It can really overwhelm you. If you just start out with a few squads of infantry, put them together, put them across the table, that will be fantastic. That will do the job perfect. And that's it really. That's our recommendations for starting in the game. You can go for the €51 2-player starter set and call it a day. You can go for the Battle of the Bulge 2-player starter set for about 112-ish euros and call that a day. Or alternatively, you can go completely berserk, buy starter sets, buy rulebooks, and go completely nuts. It's entirely up to you. All of these things are valid. They'll all get you where you need to go. And will get you deeper into a fantastic and enjoyable system. So, if you're a veteran, what advice would you give to a newbie just starting into the game? Or if you are a new player, which army has caught your eye? Let us know in the comments below, and look forward to more bolt action from the Dice Gods coming soon. Huge thanks to our channel members and patrons, especially Mr. Joe Rogers, without whom we wouldn't be able to keep this channel going. And to you, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.